He slammed the passenger doors so hard the whole truck shook, and before I could even put my key in the ignition, he turned to me and said, "You're not wearing that inside." I looked down at my blazer. It was navy blue, pressed, professional. I had worn it to board meetings with Fortune 500 executives. I had worn it the day I testified before a Senate subcommittee. "It makes you look like you're trying too hard," he said, pulling on his seatbelt with a sharp snap. "Today is about your brother. Don't make it about you." I didn't say anything. I started the car. The drive to the hospital where my brother Theo worked was 40 minutes through the flat gray sprawl of suburban Ohio, past the same Dollar Generals and Applebee's and nail salons I had grown up wanting to escape. My father sat in the passenger seat with his arms crossed, staring out the window like he was watching a documentary he'd already seen and didn't much like. My mother was in the back, her fingers working quietly through her rosary beads, which was her way of surviving car rides with him. "He's being named Chief of Surgery," my father announced to no one in particular. His voice carried the reverence of a man announcing a papal election. Chief of Surgery at 34. You know what that means. I knew what it meant. It meant Theo had done something impressive, genuinely impressive, and my father was about to spend the next 6 hours making sure every single person in that hospital understood that the achievement belonged, somehow, to the family bloodline, and not to Theo specifically. "The Hargrove name means something now," he said. There it was, right on schedule. My name is also Hargrove. It has been for 31 years. It was Hargrove when I graduated summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins. It was Hargrove when I passed my board exams on the first attempt, which fewer than 60% of candidates manage. It was Hargrove on the door of my office in Chicago, where I had been a practicing cardiothoracic surgeon for the last 4 years. And it was Hargrove on the paper I had published 8 months ago in the New England Journal of Medicine, the one that had been cited 43 times since then, the one that had quietly rewritten the standard protocol for minimally invasive valve repair in patients over 70. My father did not know about the paper. He had never asked what I did, specifically. He knew I was a heart doctor somewhere up north, which was roughly equivalent to saying Michelangelo was a painter in Italy. "Your brother called me last week," he continued. "Did you know they're naming the new cardiac wing after his mentor? Dr. Patterson. 30 years at that hospital. Now that is a legacy." He turned his head slightly in my direction, the way he always did when he was about to deliver something designed to sting. "Some people leave a mark. Some people just pass through." I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. In my coat pocket, my hospital credentials sat in their leather case. Not the Ohio hospital we were driving to. My credentials from the University of Chicago Medical Center, where I held a joint appointment as Associate Professor of Cardiothoracic Surgery, where my department had just received a $7 million research grant with my name as the principal investigator. I did not mention any of this. "It's a big day for him," I said. "It's a big day for all of us," my father corrected, as if I had tried to diminish it. My mother's rosary beads clicked softly in the back seat. We arrived at Riverside General at 10:15. The hospital was a mid-sized regional center, the kind that serves a community well and aspires to do more than it currently can. My father strode through the automatic doors like he owned the place, which he did not. But no one watching him would have guessed otherwise. He was wearing his good sport coat and the expression of a man prepared to receive congratulations on behalf of his family. Theo was waiting in the main lobby, still in his scrubs. He'd probably come straight from rounds. He looked tired in the specific way surgeons look tired. Not sleep-deprived exactly, but worn at the edges from years of operating inside other people's bodies and carrying the weight of that knowledge home every night. He was good at his job. I had always known he was good at his job. I had always known he was good at his job. I was proud of him, genuinely, without ambivalence. He saw my father first, and his face lit up in the way it always did, the way all of us had learned to perform since childhood, because the alternative was worse. "There he is," my father bellowed, drawing the attention of the receptionist and the 2 elderly men waiting near the magazine rack. "The chief of surgery." Theo laughed a little awkwardly and accepted the hug. "It's not official until the ceremony, Dad." "Don't be modest. It's official My father held him at arm's length and looked at him with the specific expression he reserved for Theo: warm, uncomplicated, proud in a way that cost nothing. Then he looked at me. Your sister drove. It wasn't a thanks, it was a task description, as if my contribution to the day had been vehicular. Hey, sis. Theo came to hug me, and his grip was genuine, tighter than the formal one he'd given our father. When he pulled back, he looked at my face with the quick, assessing glance of a doctor who has learned to read what people aren't saying. He started to say something and then stopped. You look good, he said instead. So do you. Congratulations. My father had already moved toward the reception desk, loudly announcing himself to the woman behind the glass. Harold Hargrove, father of the new chief of surgery. I assume there are seats reserved? The woman blinked and looked at her clipboard. Theo steered us gently toward the corridor. The ceremony's in the conference center on the 3rd floor. I need to go back upstairs for about 20 minutes and then I'll meet you there. Go, I told him. We'll find it. He squeezed my arm and disappeared around the corner. I watched him go, thinking about how different we were and how much that hadn't mattered when we were kids, how it had only started to matter when my father needed to rank us. The conference center was a large room with rows of cushioned chairs and a raised platform at the front, where a podium stood draped in the hospital's blue and white colors. Families and colleagues filled the seats. My father, with the unerring instinct of a man who considers himself important, located the front row and installed himself in the 2nd seat, saving the aisle seat for himself and leaving one for my mother beside him. He set his jacket on the seat next to her. I understood what that meant without being told. I found a seat in the 4th row, slightly to the left with a decent sightline to the stage. It was fine. I had sat in worse places. A woman came and sat down beside me. She was in her late 50s, silver-haired, wearing a white coat over a cashmere sweater. She glanced at me the way people glance at strangers they're about to share a small space with. A quick, polite acknowledgement. Then she looked again. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not in suspicion, in recognition. Excuse me, she said carefully. Are you Dr. Hargrove from Chicago? I looked at her. I recognized her about half a second after she recognized me. Dr. Harbo, Irene Stahl, chairman of the Department of Surgery at Cleveland Clinic, one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons in the country. We had met twice at conferences. She'd written me an email after my knee gem paper came out calling it, and I am quoting directly from memory because I had read it 4 times, the most elegant piece of clinical reasoning I've read in this specialty in a decade. Dr. Stahl, I said quietly. Her face broke into a genuine smile. I thought that was you. What are you doing in Ohio? Don't tell me they finally lured you away from Chicago. I tilted my head slightly toward the front row, where my father was now leaning over to the man beside him, pointing at the stage. My brother's the one being honored today. Her eyebrows rose. Theo Hargrove is your brother? He is. Small world. She shook her head, delighted. I'm on the hospital's advisory board. I've been following his work in laparoscopic technique for 2 years. He's extraordinary. She paused, though I suppose surgical talent runs in the family. I kept my expression neutral. He worked for it. So did you. She dropped her voice a fraction, in the way that people do when they shift from pleasantries to real conversation. I heard you're presenting at the ACC conference in March, the valve repair data. That's the plan. I'll be there. She said it like a promise. The field needs more people doing what you're doing. A colleague of hers caught her eye from across the room and she excused herself with a warm smile, touching my arm briefly as she stood. We'll talk more after. I'd love to catch up properly. She moved away. I turned back toward the front of the room. My father was watching me from the 2nd row. He had caught the tail end of the exchange. The white coat, the warmth of her manner toward me, the specific body language of professional respect. He was frowning slightly, trying to decode it. I met his eyes for a moment and then looked away. The ceremony began 20 minutes later. The hospital's CEO took the podium first, a compact man with reading glasses and the practiced warmth of someone who gives speeches for a living. He talked about the hospital's growth, its mission, the importance of this particular appointment. Then he introduced the keynote speaker. "It is my great honor," he said, "to introduce a physician whose contributions to cardiothoracic surgery have been recognized at the national level. She serves on the editorial board of 3 major journals, holds a joint appointment at the University of Chicago, and her most recent publication has already changed the way surgeons across the country approach valve repair in elderly patients. Please welcome Dr. Descartes." Irene Stahl, chairman of surgery at Cleveland Clinic. My father turned his head to find Dr. Stahl walking up the aisle toward the stage. He watched her pass. He watched her shake the CEO's hand. He watched her adjust the microphone. And then Dr. adjusts the microphone. Irene Stahl, chairman of the Department of Surgery at Cleveland Clinic, looked out over the audience and said, "Before I begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone in this room." The words landed quietly. Half the audience kept their eyes on the stage. My father did too. The work being done in minimally invasive cardiac surgery has been evolving rapidly in the last several years, Dr. Stahl said, and much of the most important thinking in that space has come from a researcher right here in this room. Her paper in the New England Journal of Medicine last year has been cited by surgical teams from Boston to Houston. She's presenting at ACC in March, and apparently she drove her family here this morning, which I think tells you everything you need to know about her character. A quiet laugh moved through the room. "Dr. Hargrove," she said, looking directly at me, "I hope you'll stand." I did not move immediately. There was a beat, a single suspended second, where the room was still, and I sat with my hands in my lap and felt the air change the way it changes before weather. Then I stood. The applause started near the back and moved forward like a wave. Dr. Stahl was clapping too, at the podium looking at me with the open warmth of someone who does not give compliments carelessly and means every word of the ones they give. I kept my eyes straight ahead. I did not look at the second row. I made myself look, finally, about 15 seconds in, because I needed to see it, not out of cruelty. Out of something more complicated than that. My father had turned in his seat. His sport coat was still spread across the chair beside him where he had left it. His hands were resting on his knees, unmoving. He was not clapping. He was not doing anything at all. He was looking at me with the expression of a man who has just discovered that the foundation he built his house on has been the wrong material all along. His mouth was open, slightly, just slightly. The man beside him, a stranger, some colleague of Theo's, leaned over and said something. My father nodded, a slow mechanical motion, like a machine running low on power. I sat back down after a few seconds. The ceremony continued. Theo received his appointment with the kind of grace he had always had, grateful, self-deprecating, giving credit to everyone around him. He was good at this part. He had always been good at the parts my father approved of. When it was over and the room began to empty, I stayed in my seat for a moment. I was not ready to stand. I was not ready for the conversation I knew was coming in the parking lot, inside the car, in the sealed space where my father would be forced to either acknowledge the truth or construct a new lie. Dr. Stahl found me before I could leave. "I hope that wasn't too much," she said, sitting down in the chair beside me. "It was fine. Your face said otherwise, for a moment." I looked at her. "My father didn't know," I said. "About the paper. About Chicago. About most of it." She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't awkward, that is just a person sitting with something and not rushing past it. "How long?" she asked. "My whole career." She nodded slowly. She did not say what most people would say, which is some version of, "I'm sorry," or "that must have been so hard," both of which are true, but neither of which quite fits the specific shape of this particular grief. "I know a little about invisible work," she said instead. "I was the only woman in my program for 3 years. My department chief called me by my first name in front of patients for 5 years after that." She looked at the stage where staff were beginning to stack chairs. "The work doesn't stop being real because someone doesn't see it." "I know that," I said. "I know you know it." She stood. Come find me at ACC. We should talk about a collaboration. She left. I sat there another moment, then gathered my things and walked out. Theo was waiting in the corridor. He had changed out of his scrubs into the shirt and slacks he'd worn to work that morning. He looked like himself again, my brother, the one I had grown up with, the one who used to wait for me outside my bedroom door when our father's voice got too loud. "Dad's at the car," he said. I figured. He looked at his shoes and then back at me. "I didn't know she was going to do that. Dr. Stahl, I didn't know she knew you." Small world. Evelyn. He said my name with a particular weight, the way he used to say it when we were children, and he was about to ask me for something he already knew was important. I should have said something. Today and before today, all those times I should have said something. "You were in a hard spot." "I was a coward," he said. "That's what it was. I was a coward, and I let you carry it alone because it was easier than fighting him." He rubbed the back of his neck, and for a moment he looked about 22 years old. "I'm sorry." I looked at my brother, genuinely looked at him, the way you look at people when you're deciding how much of the truth to carry into the next part of your life. "You were there when it counted," I said finally. "The hug in the lobby. That was real." He nodded. His eyes were wet. "Come to dinner tonight? Mom wants to go to that Italian place on 4th Street, the one we used to go to on birthdays." "With Dad?" "Yes." I thought about it for a longer moment than he expected. He waited, which was the right thing to do. "Okay," I said. The restaurant was the kind of place that has been in the same location for 30 years, owned by the same family, with the same red checkered tablecloths and the same basket of bread they bring before you've even ordered. We had been coming here since I was 8 years old. I'd ordered the same thing every time. The chicken piccata, extra capers, the house salad with the dressing on the side, and I still did. Because some things you don't give up just because you grew up. My father was already at the table when Theo and I arrived. He had ordered a Coke, which he always did and never finished. My mother was beside him, reading the menu even though she always ordered the same pasta. She looked up when we came in and gave me the smile she reserved for moments when she was relieved. A little too wide, a little too fast. I sat across from my father. He looked up. He looked back down at his menu. We sat that way for a minute. The bread came. My mother took a piece. Theo took 2. My father didn't move. "That woman," he said finally. He was still looking at the menu. His voice was careful in the way that voices are when they're managing something internal that hasn't fully resolved yet. "Dr. Stahl, how does she know you?" "Conferences," I said. "She read my paper. The one in, she said, the New England Journal." "Yes." He turned a page in the menu even though he'd been staring at the same page for 3 minutes. "I didn't know you had published something like that." "You didn't ask." It came out quieter than I intended, not as an accusation, though it was one. Just as a fact, stated plainly, the way you state the temperature outside or the distance between 2 cities. My father set the menu down. He folded his hands on top of it. His knuckles were large and scarred. He had worked construction for 20 years before his back gave out, and his hands were the record of it. I had always been a little afraid of those hands when I was small. Now they just looked like what they were, the hands of a tired man who had carried heavy things and was still carrying them in ways he didn't have words for. "I don't understand it," he said. His voice was different now. Lower. "The work you do. I never understood it. I never—" He stopped. Started again. "When you left for Hopkins, I thought you were trying to leave us behind, like we weren't good enough." "I wasn't leaving you behind. I was going somewhere. I know that now." He said it slowly, like he was reading from a page he'd just flipped to. "I didn't then. And then every time he came home and talked about valves and procedures and journals, I didn't understand any of it. And not understanding it made me feel small, so I made it smaller." He looked at me for the first time in the conversation, and his eyes were the eyes of a man in the middle of something he hadn't practiced. That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. My mother had stopped pretending to read her menu. Theo was looking at the table. I thought about something I had learned in my first year of residency, a lesson that had nothing to do with medicine. I had a patient, a 73-year-old man from Indiana, who had spent 40-year-old man from Indiana, who had spent 40 years refusing to talk to his daughter. He came in for a routine valve procedure, and when I sat with him beforehand to explain what we were going to do, he told me he hadn't spoken to her in 4 decades over something neither of them could clearly remember. He said it the way people confess things to doctors that they can't say anywhere else, quickly, looking past my shoulder, like the words needed somewhere to go before the surgery. He made it through fine. 2 days later, his daughter was in the waiting room. She had driven 8 hours when she heard. I watched them through the glass in the door, not talking, just sitting side by side, and I thought about the 40 years they had spent in separate rooms of the same grief. I wasn't willing to have that story. I need you to know something, I said to my father. I didn't stay quiet all these years because I thought you didn't deserve to know. I stayed quiet because every time I tried to tell you, you changed the subject. You asked about Theo. You asked if I was seeing anyone. You asked about the drive up. You never asked about the work. I kept my voice steady. Not cold, just clear. I needed you to want to know. I couldn't keep handing you something you weren't reaching for. He nodded, slowly, the way people nod when they know you're right, and it costs them something to admit it. I should have reached, he said. The waiter came. We ordered. The bread got passed around again. I don't know exactly when the conversation shifted from the weight of it to something else. Something that felt more like being a family and less like being witnesses at a proceeding. It happened gradually, the way pressure releases, not all at once, but in small adjustments. My mother told the story about Theo failing his driving test the first time, which he had always pretended hadn't happened. Theo retaliated with the time I got carsick on the family trip to Gettysburg and threw up on my father's shoes. My father laughed at that, a real laugh surprised out of him, and something in his face loosened that I hadn't seen loosen in years. At some point, the chicken piccata arrived, and it was exactly as I remembered it. My father asked me, halfway through his pasta, what the paper was about, not in the pointed way he sometimes asked questions, using them as a way to find something to disagree with. He asked it the way you ask when you actually want to know. I told him. I kept it simple. Bad valves in older patients, a less invasive way to fix them, fewer complications, shorter recovery. He listened. He asked one follow-up question, which was whether it hurt the patients when we did it, which was both the least and most important question a person could ask about surgery. I told him we put them under. He nodded. So people are walking around right now, he said, with hearts that work because of what you figured out. I looked at him across the checkered tablecloth, across 31 years of distance that had never really been distance. Just 2 people standing on opposite sides of a language barrier neither of them had fully built. Some of them, I said, hopefully. He picked up his fork. He looked at it for a second. I'm sorry about the jacket on the chair, he said, at the ceremony. It was such a small thing to name out of everything. But that was how it goes sometimes. The large ones are too heavy to lift all at once. You start with the jacket on the chair. It's okay, I said. It's not, he said. It's not, he said, but I'm working on it. The drive back to my parents' house afterward was quiet. Not the suffocating quiet of the morning. Something else. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm has moved through, and you're standing in the wet air and things look the same as they did before, but aren't quite. My father fell asleep in the passenger seat 20 minutes in. I could hear him breathing, slow and even. My mother was awake in the back, looking out at the passing highway lights. He's proud of you, she said softly after a while. He has been for years. He just didn't know how to say it without making himself small. I know, Mom. Do you? I thought about it honestly. I'm getting there. She reached forward and put her hand on my shoulder for a moment, the way she used to when I was small and she was tucking me in. Then she sat back and looked out the window. I drove the rest of the way with the radio off, Just the hum of the engine and the dark interstate and the lights of other people's lives going past in both directions. When I got back to my hotel that night, I opened my laptop out of habit and found an email from Dr. Till, Stahl's assistant, sent at 9:47 p.m. She was forwarding the details for the ACC conference in March, and a note at the bottom in Dr. Stahl's own handwriting, scanned and attached, looking forward to it. Bring your father if he wants to come. Let him watch what a heart surgeon looks like when she's at work. I read it twice. I sat back in my chair. Outside the hotel window, the Ohio sky was doing what it always did in November. Going dark and gray and honest. No performance in it, just the plain truth of what it was. I thought about sending a text to my father. I picked up my phone and put it down again. There would be time for that. There was more time now than there had been this morning, which was its own kind of gift. I closed the laptop and turned off the light.